Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. I'm Paul Davenport, Boast's resident tech journalist, and today I am thrilled to welcome to the show Arjun Puri, CEO and co-founder of Symbiotic AI. At Symbiotic AI, Arjun and his team are democratizing precision heart health by harnessing the potential of AI to empower both clinicians and patients making critical healthcare decisions. Their industry leading digital health solutions span the fields of data science, machine learning, and healthcare while demonstrating responsible AI usage at every stop. Arjun specifically brings almost 15 years of experience leading teams in the health tech and digital spaces through new product development, commercialization, and implementation, delivering solutions that improve healthcare access, sustainability, and service quality. He's done this through his own personal consulting practice while playing a key role in the larger Alberta tech ecosystem to help local innovators across the health tech space reach new heights. It's an impressive mission, and I can't wait to pick Arjun's brain on his work to date and what's next for Symbiotic, Alberta, and the healthcare industry at large. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Arjun.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
I am thrilled. Now, we were chatting right before this, not to jump straight to something, but we were talking a little bit about how Alberta is now not just known for the classic things that you think of when you think of Alberta, or even on the tech side. We were talking about how it was very much about innovation, but the entire community is expanding beyond the traditional sectors to encompass things that I would have thought were happening in BC, or I would have thought were happening in Ontario. We went through that at the beginning of the show. And before I dive into the other things, I'd like to maybe speak or hear from you why we think Alberta is the place to be right now when it comes to developing innovative new solutions and embarking on, again, true R&D that is tackling technological uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And, I've been asking myself this question for the past few years as we've been building Symbiotic AI here in Calgary. It doesn't hurt that you've got beautiful mountains close by. So after a long, hard day of work, you can escape for a little while and go experience the beautiful outdoors that, Alberta has to offer. But I think, over the past few years, even after, the COVID pandemic, I think we've seen a lot of migration of talent to want to explore what else is outside of the major metropolises in Canada and even in the U.S. Whether you're in Boston, whether you're in Toronto, or whether you were based out of Vancouver, I think it pushed people to want to explore what else is out there. And there's a lot out here in Alberta. Traditionally focused in the energy sector, there was a big push about 5 to 7 years ago to diversify the economy, to really think about what other problems can we solve? Where are the transferable learnings and skill sets that we can take from our, traditional areas of expertise where Alberta has been, well recognized, whether that's in the renewable energy or traditional energy sector. But how could we apply that success to the tech sector? How could we apply that success to the pharma sector or the digital health sector? And that diversification, along with migration of talent, has led to a lot of flourishing of the entrepreneurship, community out here in Calgary as well as in Edmonton, and we're happy to be a part of it.
I am pumped to hear it. And I want to just pull back on two things that you had mentioned in that I think really worth repeating. So one, the COVID of it all. I think a lot of people also thought differently about what they want to do with their lives and the kind of work that they want to do. A lot of folks who I've talked to actually on this show were like, I was deep into one mission. The coronavirus threw everything out the window. COVID-19 made me have to rethink my startup if it was a founder who we were talking to, or even if it was just somebody who was working on an R&D team. They're like, what are my actual passions and what can I actually accomplish with the resources at hand? So I think a lot of entrepreneurs were born out of that, just full stop. But to your point about Alberta, aside from the beautiful mountains and aside from just the environmental benefits of being in an ecosystem like that, there's so much support there. So expanding programs, I was even thinking about how like every province had some kind of mission like on that, like Quebec, the CDAE has the new AI integration as part of that tax credit. Every province is trying to really like muscle up what they're winning at. But I love that Alberta too has kind of just like opened their arms around to include a lot more. So I jumped right into something that I didn't intend to and that I usually don't on these shows, but I want to go back to again Your bio. I gave a little bit of background. I buttered you up a little bit. I want to hear in your words, how did you get into the tech ecosystem and how did you get to symbiotic AI? Just tell me more about Arjun.
Yeah, happy to tell you a little bit about myself. I think you did an excellent intro, but to dive in just a bit deeper, my background is in clinical informatics and in digital health. I've spent the last decade and a half working right at the intersection of health systems, data science, and clinical workflows and clinical, solutions. But what really pulled me into this space, and ultimately also into entrepreneurship, were personal experiences. I'll be quite honest. With Symbiotic AI, unfortunately, my mom had a heart attack, and our family went through this really intense process of trying to figure out what the right treatment option was for her. We talked to lots of doctors in the family, as well as broadly. We did our own research, as everyone does when a loved one has been diagnosed with something critical, and we tried to understand those trade-offs. What would be better if this treatment was given versus another. Even after all of that, there was a ton of uncertainty. She's perfectly healthy and happy now, but she ended up having another mild heart attack after her initial one shortly after. That ended up leading to a 2 week readmission. And that readmission really stuck with me. It, it highlighted how difficult these treatment decisions were. And even when you feel and think that you're doing everything right and everything you can to get it right, you still don't know. And there's, you know, that feeling that, hey, am I the only one who's experiencing this? Right? Are others out there who've gone through the same thing? And through some conversations after my mom's experience, I realized that this wasn't an isolated experience. That it's common. It happens to many families, and that there's also variation in how these decisions are made by clinicians across the system. So that combination of the personal experiences along with trying to learn about, hey, how did we get to this space, was kind of the catalyst for building something to address it at Symbiotic AI for me.
That I think will speak to so many people in my audience right now. So first off, going straight to the entrepreneurship side of it all, personal experiences. The companies that actually solve these real problems and actually make a difference on the global stage are the ones that started because it was solving a problem that you felt acutely. But to your point, this isn't something that is acute. This is chronic across, I think, healthcare systems globally. You hit the nail on the head when the decision making is variable and it's not necessarily a uniform. I think a lot of folks are watching The Pit right now. I have to get pop culture of it all, but like one doctor is going to make a completely different call than another doctor. And we're not always in an emergency room scenario, but I personally have felt this with my own mother. She's still dealing with some back issues that required multiple rounds of surgery, multiple different diagnoses, multiple different experts. As I mentioned earlier, we're in Boston here. We should have access to the best and the brightest. And why can't we get a clear answer? And also, why can't I see her situation in other people when I know that they're out there? She can't be the only person doing this. They didn't invent a new ailment for her, so I couldn't get to the bottom of it. And, I'd love to know exactly how Symbiotic, like, gets to the heart of all of this. Like, what is, the solution actually providing to both practitioners and, the people who actually need care, or even just the caretakers who, like you, have been in a position where you're just like, "Am I making the best decision right now?"
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So what we're building at Symbiotic AI is an AI-enabled clinical decision support solution called Revaz AI. It's very specifically focused on coronary artery disease, which is the leading cause of death and disease globally, regardless of which nation you may hail from. The likelihood is that coronary artery disease and heart disease is the leading cause of death, if not the top three. So the global disease burden is so heavy, and what Rivaz does very specifically is it helps clinicians choose between treatment options like medical therapy, stenting, or bypass surgery for all those patients who have coronary artery disease. Today, these decisions are very complex and often variable. So as you said, two clinicians can look at the same patient and come to very different conclusions. And that variability has real life implications for people like you and I, our loved ones, as well as all the other, peers and ecosystem members that we live and work with and play with every day. So there's an actual human cost and an impact to this, but there's also a system cost to that, which means that for someone like my mom who had to go through a 2 week readmission, the system has to take on the cost of caring for a patient that may have been avoided with the more optimal treatment being administered the first time around. So what Revaz does is it takes comprehensive patient data and it generates personalized risk predictions for each treatment pathway that is applicable for that patient. So instead of relying primarily on experience or generalized guidelines that you may find from a trial that was run 10 years ago, doesn't even represent the patient that's sitting in front of you today, clinicians can get a more patient specific view of expected outcomes for that patient using data that we're already collecting, but the docs don't have the time that they would need in order to crunch all those numbers to present actionable, insights to them in a way that Revaz does. The goal of Revaz isn't to replace clinical judgment; it's to make it more precise and more data driven with the data that we're already collecting. So it seemed like a feasible problem to solve, but also a very impactful problem to solve, which is why we're building it.
I love how you phrase that too. So and correct me if I misunderstand, but again, it's going to be more precise because it's actually, I don't want to say tailored, but taking into acknowledgement the specifics of this scenario for this patient. But it's also kind of it's kind of broadening the perspective of the actual physicians and the people who are going to be diagnosing, because they're not just jumping to their first assumption or rolling with what they think is going to be the best practice without having the additional context or the ability to crunch all those numbers or to take in all that data about the patient that you were mentioning. So the system is able to look at the full suite of options, make sure that it actually fits the unique scenario, not the general guidelines that I think doctors always have in the back of their head. And again, it's a good guideline, but it's not going to work in every scenario. And again, it hits at that human cost, but also the system's cost too. Doctors aren't going to be so stressed that they're going to be making from the hip decisions or maybe the wrong decisions that are going to actually burden the system that they're in, and never take these solutions, never take, I don't want to say problems, but never take these problems off their plate, never get these patients out to the place where they need to be. And at the human level too, we want our moms to be happy and healthy. We want to make sure that they're getting the best support and not, I'm thinking about my mom draining years now, of when she should be enjoying her retirement and she should be out there like living her best life. Now it's constantly going back to doctors. I mean, she is. She's in Florida right now, so don't cry for me. But it sucks, and I just love how this is a holistic solution that, to your point, doesn't take a human out of the equation at all. It actually puts humans at the center of the equation and a specific human in a specific scenario. Is that a fair read?
It absolutely is. Look, cardiologists are um, foremost experts in what they do, right? They train for years to be able to take care of patients, and we have so much respect for our partners in the clinical space and our cardiologist partners. But there's a reality that they have to face, which is, they are doing the best they possibly can with the tools that are available to them today. What we're trying to do is give them better tools so that they can fight this battle more effectively.
Just going to repeat that. Best they can with the tools they have today. You're giving them better tools. You're giving them tools that can give them superpowers, more or less. This is going to sound really cynical. Very similar ethos to what we're doing here at Boast, as I point to the banner behind me. We aren't trying to replace your accounting function or your finance function. We're not even pretending to touch anything other than your R&D tax credits. We want to make sure that your teams that are experts in what they do aren't getting bogged down and trying to cover something that they maybe tangentially understand and then miss out on the opportunity. There's a systemic cost when you're having your R&D teams or your finance teams who do not meet in the middle at any point trying to put together an R&D tax credit claim. And there's a human cost and a system cost to all of that. I digress. Feels yucky saying that when we're talking about healthcare, but it just came to mind while we were talking through all of this. So while we're on the talk of business, I'd love to know about Symbiotic's trajectory. Just like, where are you guys at today? Where are you going in the future? Yeah. I'd love to just know, like, market ready? Is it in market right now? What's happening?
Yeah, all good questions. I think to be able to give you a little bit about where we're now and where we're going, it's quickly to kind of have the foundation of where we started. So the genesis of Symbiotic AI is really a combination of my personal experience and academic work that my co-founder, Dr. June Lee, has been doing on the academic research side. So as you already know, based on the personal side, it was my mom's experience with navigating treatment decisions for her. But on the scientific side, my co-founder, Dr. Lee, he's a professor at the University of Calgary, and he had already been doing research in this area well before we even started the company. His research was looking at how machine learning could really be applied to better understand disease and disease outcomes to support clinical decisions. So really, both these worlds came together as I think there's an unmet need in practice based on personal experience. And with Dr. Lee's work, there's emerging evidence that we can actually do something about it if we used and applied data science and AI too. So that's kind of where the genesis was. And then, where we're at today, we are now realizing that one of the biggest challenges is that Revaz is sitting at the intersection of tech, clinical care, and clinical workflows, right? So it's not enough just to build an accurate AI model. You need to, along the way, as you are commercializing and building a solution, make sure that your clinicians and end users are trusting it, they understand it, and it actually gets used in real decision making moments so that the benefits that we forecasted can actually be realized. Right. So we've conducted a retrospective efficacy and health economic study that tells us how accurate Revaz is and how good it can be at helping clinicians, as well as what the potential savings to health systems and health insurers can be. But now we need to be able to demonstrate how this is going forward in prospective trials. The other challenge and kind of something that we're encountering now is the data itself. Clinical data is complex, messy often, depending on who's collecting it, and it's also fragmented across various different sources and systems. So a big part of our work has been making that data usable in a way that makes, for reliable, clinically meaningful outputs that clinicians can actually say, okay, based on this information, I have a treatment plan in mind. And then there's also variability across regions. So we're also doing a lot of customer discovery with cardiologists in different countries. We try to do one every single week, if not more, even as the product continues to grow and we iterate on its abilities and feature sets. But the core problem is consistent, and we've noticed this after talking to cardiologists in Australia and South Korea, in India, in the U.S., in Canada, in Taiwan. Um, the workflows and constraints can differ, but the problems that we're talking about with respect to variability are still relatively common across jurisdictions and different centers where Revaz would ultimately be used. So I think one of our biggest early realizations was that we couldn't just approach this as a modeling problem, right? So we might have started out focusing initially on, hey, the technical feasibility of all of this, but we quickly learned through speaking with those docs across those different jurisdictions that if it doesn't fit into real world clinical workflows, it won't matter how good the models are and how accurate they are. Um, it won't be used. So we really leaned heavily into building and co-developing with our end users, making them comfortable and taking them to a point where they would be either upset if the product was taken away from them, or they would be comfortable advocating for its use or uptake to their leadership, to their hospital or health system CEOs, CFOs. Um, but we also wanted to really discover where the friction points are and how the information that we would offer them would actually be used. So all of that has led us to building a minimum viable product that's much more aligned to how clinicians actually think and work every day rather than what is technically possible with the tech that we have today. So we are now moving forward into prospective trials of our technology with marquee partners like the University of Ottawa Heart Institute and the Ottawa Hospital, as well as the cath labs here right in our own backyard in Edmonton and in Calgary, where we started the foundational work that has, progressed over the last 3 years. So hopefully that gives you a little bit about our journey from the past and where we're headed.
Music's in my ears. I'm going to call back on a few points that you made here just to really drive a fine line under it because you said a lot of very interesting things that I think folks listening today should follow your lead on. So it's going to again sound a little yucky because I'm using business terms when we're talking about humans and well being, but you're building advocates, you're building evangelists, you're building that trust with the product by actually meeting your users where they're at, those clinicians, those physicians. I think that ties also back to a point about responsible AI that I mentioned at the top of it. Healthcare is it's risky and you don't want to write checks you can't cash because it is life or death. I think that you're biting off not more than you can chew, but you are tackling, like we said, the biggest problem when you're looking at just ranking what is taking lives, what is actually hurting the global population and not trying to spread yourselves too thin, while at the same time meeting the users where they're at, working with them intimately so that, like you said, they don't want it taken away. They're going to be so proud and so happy about the product that you've given and about the superpowers and the better tool that you actually provided based off the old things, that they're going to be those brand evangelists. And I think a lot of folks not on this show, of course, but folks who I've talked to in the field who like are on a race or are just trying to actually like get the funding or attention for it, they skipped the part where they actually were doing that brand evangelizing, getting those advocates for you. Your customers, those early folks, those are going to be the people that carry you all the way through. And so I love that you're doing that. Again, you're meeting them where they're at, but also because this is such a glaring and global issue too that regardless of the workflows or systems or geographies where it's happening, you do ultimately need to provide the care that is going to help support these cardiac patients. I think it's great. It's focused. It's scientifically like it's the systematic investigation that everybody on the shred team is looking for when they're validating claims like that. So yeah, you guys are doing everything right. I'm very happy to hear about this.
I don't know about everything, but with the team that we've built, both our core team as well as the fantastic advisors that we have, it really allows us to be problem obsessed, right? We live and breathe that problem as opposed to falling in love with the solution, because it's ultimately the problems that we're solving that customers are going to value and end users are going to value. We hope we're doing some things right. There's signals to indicate that. But like you said, it's the scientific method, right? Experiments to get a little bit of signal, then scaling your experiment to something larger that gives you even more data, and getting to the point where, you have to decide how you want to grow your company, right? Are you going to grow it by taking on private investment? Are you going to grow it organically by bringing in product revenue? Are you going to, develop channel partnerships with large incumbents who are already in the space? That's really kind of the segue into thinking about how do you want to grow your company next once you have built that team. That's been a critical ingredient for us along our journey, is making sure that we bring on people who are, passionate about the mission and the problem that we're solving.
I love it. I'm gonna repeat what you said there. Problem obsessed. You're not just falling in love with the solution, which again, I think it dovetails very nicely with the point you made my point even better than I could previously about making sure that you are actually looking at the problem and not just so excited to bring something into market or so excited to like get the funding. Some people are serial entrepreneurs. You're bringing team members in who actually really want to get to the core of the issue here and provide that better tool, which again, it's that non-cynical view because you're really, really going to touch a lot of lives with all of this if you're able to get that advocacy and follow again the systematic process. Because you can't cut corners, you can't skip ahead. But once you build this better tool, people will be able to work faster, more effectively, and actually get those outcomes. So I love it, Arjun. Well, I know we're already past time, so I cannot thank you enough for joining me on here. Before I do a formal sign off, anything you want to shout out or any just heads up about what's on your roadmap?
No, I think you covered the vast majority of it. One last nugget that I'll leave your audience with is, scientific research and experimental development tax credits have been a key part of our capital strategy as we have been building in areas where there is uncertainty, right? If you aren't doing that already, work with the right partners to explore that, whether that's applicable to you, whether it's something that you can take into account as you think about your capital strategy and you grow your business and you think about getting to the point where you're actually in market and launching, because that can significantly influence how you decide to grow your company. So that's the last piece of thing that I'll say for you and your audience.
I love that, Arjun. And again, it kind of goes back to the government wants you to be taking these risks. That's why these tax credit programs are out there. What you're doing isn't easy, and it's not a sure thing necessarily for a lot of folks who venture into unproven territory. So if you can kind of use the fact that you are tackling something awesome and that the government really believes in what you're doing based off of their very, very stringent vetting process. Again, they don't just give out shred credits. You have to actually be tackling technological uncertainty. It unlocks a virtuous cycle. So you hit the nail on the head there, Jim. No,
De-risk that, right? Paul, like
exactly.
de-risk that for the future that you envision for your company, and do that with the uncertainty that you have. In fact, we often talk about Canada being the space where fundraising is tough, right? But it's tough because a lot of programs are available for you to support your way through early R&D. And investors, especially in the VC community, they want to see you have taken advantage of some of these programs as a building block before they say, hey, it's de-risked enough for me where I see your vision, I want to buy into your vision. So definitely something worth exploring.
It's a badge of honor more people should be touting. Yeah, I got shred because I earned it. It's an entitlement. So I love that. Beautiful. Well, Arjun, again, can't thank you enough for joining me. This has been a blast.